Sometimes the truth about an empire is invisible from the top floor. At 6:17 on a rain-soaked Monday morning, Billionaire CEO Alexander Whitmore stood alone inside the private elevator of Whitmore Global and removed the one thing everyone in the building recognized him by: his name. The silver executive badge disappeared into the pocket of his charcoal coat. In its place, he clipped on a plain temporary ID. Daniel Reed, Operations Support. For 12 years, Alexander had watched his company from 48 floors above Manhattan, through walls of glass that turned the city into something distant and manageable. Numbers arrived polished. Reports arrived perfect. Executives smiled when they entered his office and promised him that Whitmore Global remained one of America's finest places to work. Yet 3 weeks earlier, an unsigned envelope had appeared on his desk. No return address. No explanation. Only 7 words written beneath a stack of employee complaints. Come downstairs and see what you've built. Alexander had almost dismissed it. Almost. But powerful men survived by learning which whispers deserved attention. So for the first time since founding the company, he entered his own headquarters through the employee entrance. No driver. No tailored Italian suit. No assistant walking 3 steps behind him. Just a 41-year-old white man in an inexpensive navy jacket, carrying a paper cup of coffee beneath fluorescent lights that made everyone look equally tired. Nobody recognized him. That surprised him. What happened next disturbed him. A security supervisor barely looked at the senior executives passing through the turnstiles, yet stopped a black maintenance worker and inspected her badge twice. A young receptionist was publicly scolded for sitting down after working an overnight shift. 2 employees whispered about unpaid overtime, then immediately fell silent when a department manager approached. Alexander said nothing. He watched. Every polished quarterly report suddenly felt farther away. Then he saw her. She stood beside the service elevators holding a cardboard box against her chest, her deep brown skin illuminated by the cold morning light spilling through the lobby windows. Her name badge read Naomi Carter. She wasn't dressed like an executive. There was no designer handbag, no expensive jewelry, only a simple burgundy blouse beneath a worn black coat. But everyone seemed to know her. A nervous intern received a reassuring smile. An elderly custodian received help lifting a supply container. A frightened employee quietly slipped Naomi a folded document. Alexander noticed that. So did someone else. Ms. Carter. The voice came from behind them. Conversation died instantly. Naomi turned toward Regional Director Richard Hale, whose tailored gray suit probably cost more than some employees earned in a month. His eyes dropped to the paper in her hand. Another complaint. Naomi's fingers closed around it. Another employee asking to be heard. Hale smiled without warmth. People who want careers here should learn the difference between being heard and causing trouble. Alexander felt something inside him sharpen. Naomi didn't retreat. She simply met Hale's stare with a calmness more powerful than anger. Then maybe, she said quietly, someone should ask why telling the truth has become dangerous in this building. Silence. Hale walked away. Naomi exhaled once, controlled and steady, then turned and found Alexander watching her. For one suspended second, neither spoke. She didn't know the ordinary-looking stranger near the service elevator owned the building beneath her feet. And Alexander didn't yet know that the woman standing before him was about to expose a truth capable of changing his company, his legacy, and the man he believed himself to be. Alexander had spent 20 years learning how people behaved around power. That morning, he began learning how they behaved when they believed power wasn't watching. You're new. Naomi Carter's voice pulled him from his thoughts. Alexander looked up. She stood a few feet away, still holding the folded complaint Richard Hale had wanted her to surrender. First day, he replied. The lie came easier than expected. Naomi studied his temporary badge. Daniel Reed. Operations Support. That's what they tell me. A faint smile touched her face. Then someone should warn you. About what? Her eyes moved toward the crowded elevators. People notice everything in this building. They just pretend they don't. The elevator doors opened. Employees stepped aside as Hale entered, creating space around him as naturally as water around stone. Naomi waited for the next elevator. Alexander noticed. You could have gotten on. So could you. I wasn't the one he threatened. Naomi's expression changed. Not fear. Calculation. Careful, Daniel. Curiosity can become expensive around here. The next elevator arrived. They stepped inside with 3 other employees. Nobody spoke until the doors closed. Alexander had designed these elevators himself during the headquarters renovation. Brushed steel, smoked mirrors, silent acceleration. He had once considered them elegant. Today they felt like confession booths. On the 23rd floor, Naomi led him through operations. The difference from the executive floors was immediate. No panoramic offices. No Italian leather. No fresh flowers replaced every morning. Rows of desks sat beneath white fluorescent lights. Phones rang continuously. Employees worked with the quiet urgency of people who knew that being noticed could be dangerous. "Your desk is probably over there," Naomi said. Alexander followed her gaze. A young black employee stood beside an empty workstation while a manager criticized him loudly for a spreadsheet error. 2 desks away, a white employee whispered to a colleague, "Same mistake I made Friday." Alexander's jaw tightened. The manager walked away. Naomi immediately approached the young man. "Marcus, I'm fine. I didn't ask if you were fine." His shoulders dropped. Naomi lowered her voice. "Document what happened. Date, time, witnesses. Keep copies somewhere outside the company." Alexander watched her. "You do this often?" Naomi turned. "Do what?" "Help people document things." For several seconds, she said nothing. Then she placed the folded complaint inside a plain black notebook. "Someone has to remember what this company keeps forgetting." The words landed harder than she could possibly know. This company. His company. Alexander looked across the floor at hundreds of people beneath the silver Whitmore Global logo. He remembered approving the Employee Dignity Charter. He remembered signing diversity reports. He remembered receiving presentations filled with green arrows, satisfaction scores, and carefully polished percentages. Everything upstairs had told him these people were thriving. Everything downstairs told another story. Then Naomi's phone vibrated. She read the message. The warmth disappeared from her face. "What happened?" Alexander asked. She locked the screen. "Nothing." But across the floor, Richard Hale had appeared behind the glass wall of his office. Watching her, Naomi gathered her notebook. Before walking away, she looked back at Alexander. "If you want to survive here, Daniel, learn one rule." "What rule?" Her gaze remained steady. "Never confuse the company they advertise with the company people actually work for." Then she disappeared into the crowd. Alexander remained beneath the fluorescent lights, motionless. For the first time in 12 years, the billionaire CEO looked at the empire bearing his name and wondered how much of it had been hidden from him. By noon, Alexander understood something no financial report had ever taught him. Fear had a sound. It sounded like keyboards suddenly becoming louder when a manager entered the room. It sounded like conversations ending halfway through a sentence. It sounded like employees saying, "Everything's fine," without looking anyone in the eye. From his temporary desk on the 23rd floor, Alexander watched the machinery of Whitmore Global operate without the protective glass of the executive suite. And the view was becoming unbearable. At 12:08, an email appeared in his new employee inbox. "Mandatory performance review, conference room 23C. Alexander frowned. Across the aisle, Marcus, the young employee Naomi had helped that morning, received the same message. The color drained from his face. Naomi noticed immediately. "Marcus." He turned his monitor toward her. Her expression hardened. "Don't go alone. It's mandatory." "Then I'll come with you." Minutes later, Alexander watched them enter the glass-walled conference room. Richard Hale was waiting inside with Human Resources Director Evelyn Price. Alexander recognized Evelyn instantly. 6 months earlier, she had stood in his executive boardroom presenting a glowing employee culture report. "Whitmore Global has never been healthier," she told him. He had believed her. Now he watched her slide a document toward Marcus. Even through the glass, Alexander could see the young man's hands trembling. Naomi remained beside him. Hale said something. Marcus lowered his head. Then Naomi reached for the document. Hale pulled it away. That single movement told Alexander more than 100 pages of corporate reporting. He rose. By the time he reached the hallway, the conference room door had opened. Marcus emerged first. His eyes were red, but his face remained controlled. Naomi followed. "What happened?" Alexander asked. Marcus kept walking. Naomi stopped. "They're putting him on final warning." "For the spreadsheet?" "For performance concerns." Alexander remembered the white employee admitting to making the same mistake. "What about the other person?" Naomi looked directly at him. No warning. Something cold settled behind Alexander's ribs. Does HR know? Naomi gave a quiet, humorless laugh. HR was sitting in the room. Before Alexander could respond, Hale appeared in the doorway. Ms. Carter. Naomi turned. You seem unusually interested in matters outside your responsibilities. Fair treatment is everyone's responsibility. Hale's smile tightened. That attitude may explain why your promotion has been delayed again. Alexander's eyes shifted to Naomi. Again. She didn't flinch. I earned that promotion 18 months ago. According to you. According to every performance review before I started reporting discrimination. The hallway went silent. Alexander felt the truth rearranging itself inside him. Naomi wasn't merely helping frightened employees. She had been fighting this system alone. And paying for it. Hale stepped closer. You should think carefully about what you're accusing this company of. Naomi's voice remained calm. I'm not accusing the company. Her eyes moved briefly toward the silver Whitmore Global logo on the wall. I'm asking whether the man whose name is on that wall knows what's being done beneath it. Alexander stopped breathing for half a second. Hale walked away. Naomi turned toward him, unaware of the weight her words carried. You okay, Daniel? Alexander looked at the logo. His name gleamed beneath the fluorescent lights. For years, it had represented everything he'd built. Now it looked less like a legacy and more like evidence. Alexander had always believed corruption announced itself with greed. He was beginning to understand that sometimes it arrived wearing a company badge and carrying perfectly approved paperwork. By Wednesday morning, his undercover identity had become invisible enough to be useful. People stopped lowering their voices around Daniel Reed. Managers ignored him. Employees complained beside him. And every hour revealed another fracture beneath Whitmore Global's polished surface. Naomi Carter became his unwilling guide through all of it. Not because she trusted him. She didn't. But because Alexander kept appearing whenever something felt wrong. You asked too many questions, she told him as they carried archived files toward the records room. I've been told curiosity is expensive. You remembered. I remember useful advice. Naomi glanced at him. For the first time, her smile reached her eyes. It vanished when they entered the records room. Marcus was already there. He closed the door behind them. I found something. From beneath his jacket, he removed several printed spreadsheets. Naomi's expression sharpened. What are these? Promotion records. 5 years. Alexander stepped closer. Names filled the pages beside performance scores, disciplinary actions, salary adjustments, and management recommendations. At first, nothing seemed extraordinary. Then the pattern appeared. Employees with excellent evaluations repeatedly denied advancement. Complaints followed. Then warnings. Then resignations. Naomi's name appeared 3 times. Promotion recommended. Management hold. Promotion recommended. Management hold. Leadership concerns. Alexander stared at the final phrase. What leadership concerns? Naomi folded her arms. Apparently asking why black employees were being passed over made me difficult. Marcus pointed farther down the page. Look at the salary adjustments. Alexander did. His stomach tightened. Employees doing equivalent work were receiving noticeably different raises. Some discrepancies stretched across years. Who approves these? He asked. Hale's office, Marcus replied. And HR. Alexander's voice became quieter. Does executive leadership receive these records? Marcus laughed bitterly. They receive summaries. Summaries. The word felt poisonous. Alexander remembered them perfectly. Colorful charts. Carefully selected averages. Numbers transformed into reassurance before reaching the 48th floor. Someone hadn't merely created an unfair system. Someone had designed it to remain invisible to him. Footsteps sounded outside. Marcus froze. The handle moved. Naomi took the spreadsheets, slipped them inside an empty records binder, and returned it to the shelf seconds before Richard Hale entered. His gaze moved from Naomi to Marcus, then to Alexander. What exactly is happening here? Inventory review, Naomi answered calmly. Hale looked at Alexander's badge. Daniel Reed. Alexander met his eyes. For the first time in his life, one of his own executives looked at him without recognizing the man who could end his career with a signature. Your temporary staff, Hale said. Temporary people should understand their place. Alexander almost smiled. My place. Do your job. Collect your paycheck. Don't become involved in matters above your level. Naomi's eyes flickered toward Alexander, warning him not to respond. He obeyed. For now. Hale left. The door clicked shut. Marcus released the breath he'd been holding. Naomi retrieved the binder. You still want to know what's wrong with this company, Daniel? Alexander looked at the pages bearing her name. Then at the woman who had risked her career preserving truths his executives had buried. Yes. Naomi held his gaze. Then tomorrow night, I'll show you something they never intended anyone upstairs to see. Alexander felt the room grow strangely still. He had entered his company looking for a problem. Now he understood. He was looking for evidence. Some truths were hidden because nobody had looked closely enough. Others were hidden because powerful people had worked very hard to bury them. At 8:42 Thursday evening, most of Whitmore Global had gone dark. Alexander waited near the service elevators in his navy jacket, watching Manhattan glitter beyond the windows. 48 floors above him sat his real office, untouched since his disappearance into the company. His executive assistant believed he was conducting confidential negotiations overseas. His board believed he was unavailable. Richard Hale believed Daniel Reed was insignificant. For the moment, Alexander preferred it that way. The elevator opened. Naomi stepped out carrying her black notebook and a small flash drive. No Marcus? Alexander asked. I've already involved him too much. She walked toward the records department. Alexander followed. Where are we going? To meet the employees who don't exist. He stopped. Naomi glanced back. Coming. They descended 2 floors to an unused training room. When Naomi opened the door, 11 people were waiting. Men, women, black, white, Latino, Asian. Different ages, different departments. But Alexander recognized the same guarded expression on every face. Fear disciplined into silence. A woman named Rebecca spoke first. She had worked in accounting for 9 years. After reporting that her supervisor manipulated overtime records, her annual rating mysteriously dropped from exceptional to needs improvement. Then came Jamal from logistics. Passed over for promotion 4 times despite training 2 employees who later became his supervisors. Then Elena. Transferred after filing a harassment complaint. Then Thomas. Pressured to alter internal performance statistics before they were sent upstairs. Alexander's attention sharpened. What statistics? Thomas looked at Naomi. She nodded. Employee satisfaction. Promotion equity. Complaint resolution. Alexander felt the air leave his lungs. Those were the reports presented directly to him. Who ordered the changes? Thomas hesitated. Regional management. Hale. Sometimes. Thomas lowered his voice. Sometimes the instructions came from higher. The room became still. Alexander stared at him. Higher than Hale? Thomas nodded. Naomi watched Alexander carefully. You look surprised. I am. Why? Because I signed those reports. Because I trusted those numbers. Because my name is Alexander Whitmore. Instead, he said, I thought companies this large had safeguards. Naomi's expression softened, not with pity, but disappointment. Safeguards only work when the people controlling them want the truth. She connected the flash drive to an old laptop. Folders appeared across the screen. Emails. Salary records. Internal complaints. Promotion histories. Settlement agreements. Years of them. Alexander leaned closer. Then he saw a document that made his blood turn cold. Executive Review Summary, revised version. Beside it sat another file. Executive Review Summary, original. Same quarter. Different numbers. Alexander opened both. Complaints involving discrimination had been reduced by nearly 70% in the version sent to his office. Promotion disparities had disappeared entirely. Employer attention warnings had been removed. Someone had built 2 realities inside Whitmore Global. One for the people downstairs. Another for the billionaire upstairs. Alexander slowly closed the laptop. Naomi studied him. Now you understand why I kept records. He looked around the room at people his company had taught to distrust its promises. Why didn't anyone contact the CEO directly? A silence followed. Then Naomi answered. We did. Alexander's eyes lifted. 3 times. She opened her notebook and removed copies of 3 letters. Each was addressed personally to Alexander Whitmore, Chief Executive Officer. His name, his office, his company. Alexander stared at the letters he had never seen. And suddenly the investigation changed. Someone wasn't merely hiding the truth from him. Someone close enough to control what reached his desk had been protecting the lie. The most dangerous betrayal rarely comes from an enemy. It comes from someone who already knows which doors you never think to lock. Alexander did not sleep that night. At 2:13 a.m., he sat alone in his penthouse study with Naomi's 3 letters spread across the walnut desk before him. Beyond the windows, Manhattan shimmered beneath a curtain of rain. Each letter carried the same destination: Office of Alexander Whitmore. Each had disappeared before reaching him. He opened his private laptop and accessed a security archive available only to the CEO. The correspondence logs appeared. Alexander searched the dates. First letter: received, redirected. Second letter: received, redirected. Third letter: received, archived by executive authorization. His fingers stopped. Only 4 people possessed that level of access. Alexander stared at the names. One belonged to Evelyn Price. Another belonged to Richard Hale. The third belonged to his chief operating officer. The fourth made his chest tighten: Jonathan Pierce, his oldest friend, the man who had helped him build Whitmore Global from 2 rented offices and a borrowed conference table. Alexander closed the laptop. For the first time, the investigation felt personal. By morning, Daniel Reed returned to work. Naomi found him in the break room staring into untouched coffee. "You look terrible." "Thank you." That wasn't a compliment. It was accurate. She poured herself coffee and leaned against the counter. "You found something." Alexander looked at her. She was perceptive in a way that made lying increasingly difficult. "I realize the problem may go higher than Hale." Naomi's face remained calm. "I told you that. I didn't want to believe it. People rarely do when the truth threatens someone they trust." The sentence landed precisely where she could not know it would. Alexander studied her. "How did you keep fighting this long?" Naomi looked into her cup. For once, her confidence softened. "My mother worked 34 years in an insurance office. She trained people who became managers over her. Every year they told her, 'Next time.'" Her voice remained steady. She retired without ever getting the office she earned. Alexander said nothing. I promised myself I wouldn't inherit her silence. There was no bitterness in Naomi's expression. That affected him more than anger would have. "You could have left Whitmore Global." "I almost did." "Why didn't you?" Naomi looked through the glass wall toward the employees beginning another workday. "Because leaving would have saved me." She paused. "Staying might save someone after me." Alexander felt something shift inside him. For years, he had measured leadership through expansion, profit, acquisitions, market share. Naomi measured it through who remained vulnerable after she walked away. Suddenly, his definition felt embarrassingly small. Her phone buzzed. She read the screen. This time, Alexander saw the message. "Report to HR, 9 a.m. immediately." Naomi's jaw tightened. "What is it?" he asked. She slipped the phone into her pocket. "They're opening an investigation." "Into Hale?" Her eyes met his. "Into me." Alexander went still. "For what?" "Unauthorized possession of confidential company records." The meaning was immediate. Someone knew. Someone had discovered the evidence. Naomi picked up her notebook. "If they terminate me today, Daniel, promise me something." "What?" "Don't let those files disappear." Alexander looked at the woman who still believed he was powerless, then toward the executive elevators. For 5 days, he had hidden his identity to discover the truth. Now the truth was coming for Naomi. And Alexander understood that remaining invisible was no longer investigation. It was permission. There comes a moment when silence stops being patience and becomes a choice. At 8:58 a.m., Naomi Carter walked into Human Resources alone. Alexander watched from across the floor. Through the glass walls, he could see Evelyn Price seated at the conference table. Richard Hale sat beside her, perfectly composed. A third man occupied the head chair. Jonathan Pierce, Alexander's oldest friend, his chief operating officer, the man who had stood beside him when Whitmore Global was nothing more than ambition, debt, and 2 young men refusing to fail. Alexander felt something inside him turn cold. Jonathan wasn't supposed to be there. Naomi sat down. Evelyn pushed a folder toward her. "We've completed a preliminary review," she said. "You removed confidential documents without authorization. I preserved evidence. That's not your determination to make." He'll lean back. "You've created unnecessary disruption for months, Naomi. By reporting discrimination? By refusing to follow procedure." Naomi looked toward Jonathan. "And what happens when procedure protects the people being reported?" Jonathan's expression barely changed. "Careful. One word. Quiet." Controlled. Alexander knew that tone. He had heard Jonathan use it during billion-dollar negotiations. Naomi didn't move. I've been careful for 18 months. Evelyn slid another document forward. A termination agreement. We're offering a clean separation. Sign today, accept the severance package, and both sides move forward. Naomi read the first page. Then the second. Her eyes stopped on a paragraph. Non-disclosure. Standard language, Evelyn replied. Naomi placed the papers down. No. Hale frowned. Think carefully. I have. You could walk away with 6 months' salary. And leave everyone else here? Jonathan finally leaned forward. This company will continue without you, Miss Carter. Naomi met his gaze. Maybe that's the problem. Alexander's hand tightened at his side. Jonathan's face hardened. You are not indispensable. No employee is. Naomi stood. But dignity shouldn't depend on being indispensable. Alexander had heard enough. He crossed the hallway. Hale noticed him first. What are you doing here? Alexander opened the door. Daniel, Naomi said quietly. Hale rose. This meeting is confidential. Alexander removed the temporary badge from his jacket. For 5 days, that small piece of plastic had made him invisible. He placed it on the conference table. Then he reached into his pocket. The silver executive badge caught the morning light. Evelyn stopped breathing. Hale's face emptied. Jonathan slowly stood. Naomi stared at the name engraved beneath the company crest. Alexander Whitmore, Chief Executive Officer. The room became absolutely silent. Alexander removed his inexpensive jacket. Beneath it was the crisp white shirt and controlled posture of the man whose decisions moved billions. Hale's voice broke first. Mr. Whitmore. Alexander looked at him. No. Continue. Sir, there's been a misunderstanding. I said continue. Nobody spoke. Alexander turned toward Naomi. Shock had replaced her usual composure. You lied to me. Yes. Why? Because I needed to know what my company looked like when nobody knew I owned it. Her expression tightened. And Alexander looked around the room. At Hale. At Evelyn. Finally, Jonathan. I discovered that the people I trusted were protecting my reputation from the truth instead of protecting my employees from injustice. Jonathan stepped forward. Alex, we should discuss this privately. Alexander's gaze became steel. That's exactly how this survived. He picked up Naomi's termination agreement. Slowly, deliberately, he tore it in half. No more closed doors. Then he looked at Naomi. For what it's worth, you were right. About what? Alexander glanced through the glass toward hundreds of employees now watching. The company downstairs was nothing like the company they showed me upstairs. He opened the conference room door. And starting today, everyone is going to see both. Power could command a room into silence. Truth made people speak. By 10:30 that morning, the 23rd floor no longer resembled the frightened workplace Alexander had entered 5 days earlier. Whispers moved between desks. Employees stood near the glass conference room, trying not to stare at the billionaire CEO they had known only from photographs and annual presentations. Alexander didn't return upstairs. Instead, he remained exactly where the truth had found him. Among them, his first order suspended Richard Hale and Evelyn Price, pending an independent investigation. His second froze all employee terminations, disciplinary actions, and promotion decisions connected to their departments. His third surprised everyone. Open the conference rooms, Alexander told security. For executives, sir? For employees. Within an hour, people began arriving with stories. Some brought emails. Others brought performance reviews. A few brought nothing except memories they had carried quietly for years. Alexander listened. No assistants filtered their words. No executives summarized their pain into percentages. Naomi stood near the windows, watching him. When the room finally emptied, Alexander approached her. You haven't said much. You have enough people talking. I want to hear you. Naomi folded her arms. Which version? He frowned. The employee who reported discrimination? The woman whose promotion disappeared? Or the black woman who learned that being excellent wasn't always enough to be considered equal? Alexander had no immediate answer. Naomi looked toward the skyline. My mother used to tell me never to confuse access with acceptance. What did she mean? Sometimes they'll let you inside the room. Her eyes returned to his. That doesn't mean they believe you belong there. Alexander absorbed the words in silence. I'm sorry. Naomi's expression remained steady. For what? For not knowing. You're the CEO? The sentence wasn't cruel. That made it worse. Not knowing was part of the failure. Alexander nodded slowly. Then I'll own that failure. Across the floor, the executive elevator opened. Jonathan Pierce emerged with two corporate attorneys. Alex. Alexander turned. Jonathan's face carried the practiced calm of a man accustomed to surviving difficult rooms. This has gone far enough. Alexander's voice cooled. Has it? We have shareholders, regulators, media exposure. You can't turn internal complaints into a public spectacle. Naomi began to step away. Jonathan noticed her. This conversation doesn't concern you. Alexander moved slightly, not dramatically, just enough to place himself beside Naomi. Actually, it does. Jonathan's jaw tightened. You built this company with me, and apparently stopped me from seeing parts of it. Because CEOs cannot investigate every complaint personally. No. Alexander's gaze hardened. But CEOs can decide whether truth reaches their desk. Silence spread around them. Jonathan lowered his voice. Be careful what you destroy trying to prove you're righteous. Alexander studied the man he had once trusted more than anyone. Then Naomi spoke. Quietly. Maybe accountability doesn't destroy good companies. Jonathan looked at her. She didn't retreat. It reveals whether they were good to begin with. Alexander saw employees watching from their desks. 5 days earlier, they would have looked away. Now they didn't. Jonathan noticed too. For the first time, uncertainty crossed his face. Alexander understood then that something larger than an investigation had begun. Fear was changing sides. And Naomi Carter, the woman his system had tried to silence, was standing beneath the Whitmore Global logo without lowering her eyes. Alexander looked at her and realized she had given him something no board member ever had. Not loyalty, not admiration, a mirror. And for the first time, he was willing to look into it. Justice did not arrive at Whitmore Global with shouting. It arrived in silence, carrying evidence. 3 days after Alexander revealed his identity, the executive boardroom on the 48th floor was filled before sunrise. Outside the windows, Manhattan emerged beneath pale gold light. Inside, 12 board members sat around the polished mahogany table. Jonathan Pierce occupied the chair Alexander had once reserved for the person he trusted most. Naomi Carter sat at the opposite end. She had never been invited to this floor before. Today, Alexander had requested her presence personally. Richard Hale and Evelyn Price were absent, both formally suspended while outside investigators reviewed years of employee records. Jonathan looked at Naomi, then at Alexander. This is a board meeting. Alexander placed a thick black folder on the table. Today it's an accountability meeting. The first screen illuminated. Promotion statistics, then salary discrepancies, altered employee satisfaction reports, suppressed complaints. 3 letters addressed directly to Alexander. The room grew quieter with every page. Finally, Alexander displayed the correspondence logs. Jonathan's authorization code appeared beside 2 of the redirected complaints. A board member removed his glasses. Jonathan didn't move. You don't understand the context. Alexander's voice remained controlled. Then explain it. We were protecting the company. From employees reporting misconduct? From instability. Jonathan stood. You built an empire, Alex. Empires don't survive if every grievance reaches the throne. Alexander stared at his oldest friend. There it was. Not denial. Justification. You thought I was a throne? I thought you were a CEO. And you decided truth was beneath my pay grade. Jonathan's expression hardened. I made decisions you benefited from. Alexander looked around the boardroom. For years, these walls had reflected success back at him. Now they reflected responsibility. That's precisely why I'm accountable too. The room shifted. Jonathan blinked. Alexander continued. I signed reports I didn't verify. I trusted systems because they were convenient. I celebrated numbers without asking who disappeared behind them. His eyes moved toward Naomi. Leadership doesn't become innocent simply because someone else hid the evidence. Naomi said nothing. She didn't need to. Alexander turned back to the board. Effective immediately, Jonathan Pierce is suspended pending independent investigation. Every discrimination complaint from the last 5 years will be reopened. Compensation and promotion decisions will be externally audited. Jonathan stared at him. You're throwing away 20 years of friendship. Alexander's expression remained still. No. His voice lowered. You threw it away every time you decided protecting me from the truth mattered more than protecting people from injustice. Security entered quietly. Jonathan looked toward Naomi as he gathered his papers. This company will eat you alive. Naomi met his gaze. Then perhaps it's time the company learned a different way to survive. Jonathan left. No applause followed. Alexander had ordered none. Justice wasn't theater. When the doors closed, he looked toward Naomi. Your promotion was approved 18 months ago. Her eyes narrowed slightly. I'm aware. I can correct it today. Naomi paused. I don't want a promotion because the CEO feels guilty. Alexander absorbed the sentence. Then tell me what you want. The same thing I wanted before I knew who Daniel Reed was. What? A fair chance to earn what my work already proved I deserved. For the first time that morning, Alexander smiled. Not as a billionaire. Not as her CEO. As the man who had finally learned to listen. Then we'll start there. Sunlight crossed the boardroom table and reached Naomi first. Alexander watched it illuminate the place where she sat. For years, people like her had been discussed in this room as statistics. Today, one of them had entered carrying the truth. And the entire empire had been forced to make room.